I'm always delighted to see Nick Kirby, good friend of mine, known to most of you, a man with finger in many pies, but I'm so delighted to see him today because probably 3 hours ago he was flying back from the Isle of Man TT. So I'm glad he's here safely. He didn't get hit by a flying motorcycle. So lovely to see you, Nick. Nick's going to continue this theme that Parisa has just mentioned, circularity. And Nick is going to talk to us about the circular innovation in making corrugated board. So thank you, Nick Kirby. Big round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Tim says, just freshly in from the TT today. Wow, even if you don't like motorbikes, you've got to go just to experience it. Phenomenal. But one thing did cross my mind while I was there. In this room today, we've got lots of entrepreneurial people who've built up their businesses and taken risk. And last night I was at the bar in the Sefton Hotel in Douglas with a guy who just last year was in the Macon Grand Prix in Hong Kong. He'd nearly lost his arm, shattered his shoulder, ruptured spleen. He was bolted together all over the place. And he was at the TT to suss it out to see whether he's going to be fit to do it next year. And I'm thinking, we take risks, but these guys are mental. I mean, you know, anyway, calculated risks. Certainly are calculated, and sometimes they can be a little bit more challenging than we anticipate. And this is really a warts and all story about my journey on this. A company called CorrBoard BioEnergy. By the name, you can see it is actually located next door to CorrBoard, the sheep feeder. It is a completely independent business from CorrBoard, but they're intrinsically linked. CorrBoard gets benefits from CorrBoard BioEnergy. This is the story of CorrBoard BioEnergy. And it is a roller coaster ride to circularity. It really is. So I shall go into as much as that detail as I can. That's it to the left here. That's the CorrBoard factory. That's it to the left here. And I'll explain, first of all, how this came about and how we actually came up with this mad idea that we could do it for a corrugated plant to create circularity. I'll explain what it does, its benefits, the challenges, the investment costs. And I guess the key thing, would we do it again? And by the end of this, you can be the judge. Visionary or fool? I've got broad shoulders, so if it's the latter, that's fine, no problem. Okay, so how it came about. Farmer friend of mine, dairy farmer, he was working 14, 16 hours a day, making no money at all. And a typical farmer, he, you know, is walking around in his wellies. I can remember being there, and it was, pardon my French, pissing down with rain. I'd come from work and I was in my suit. He was in his waterproofs and his wellies. And I said, "Isn't it a horrible day?" He said, "Nick, there's no such thing as a horrible day, just the wrong clothes." Lesson 1. So I went along really to talk to him about what he might be able to do with his farm, how he might be able to turn it into something else. So he asked for guidance on a few business matters that he hadn't got experience with, about diversing his farm away from dairy. And he wanted to transform it into an energy crops growing business, basically, which I struggled with because for me, a farm is about growing crops to eat. You don't grow crops to put into an energy plant, but yes, you do. You can do that. You can actually get paid for doing that as well. And also the funding of these plants, very difficult. He hadn't got any experience with that, so I offered to help him with that. That's what his plant would have looked like, but he actually never got consent in the end because of highways issues, so it got turned down. So it never actually went ahead. However, I thought, well, okay, anaerobic digestion, which is the process here, is fueled by any organic product. Literally anything organic can go into anaerobic digestion. And so I thought, well, I wonder if we can do it in corrugated. Having knowledge of the CorrBoard site, it's a naturally bunded site. It's a big site, 19 acres, 320,000 square foot factory. And I just thought, could we somehow create an ecosystem between organic matter or food waste and corrugated packaging? And so the answer to that was yes, we could. And so went ahead and built this. When I say we, this is a joint venture business between Swanline Group and McLaren Packaging. That's it built down, bottom left there. That's one of the CHPs. There's 2 CHPs and just a few bits and pieces in pictures there. What it actually does, so it takes waste, organic waste, pretty much any description. We've got all sorts of things there. Some of them you might even be doing packaging for. I don't know who does the packaging for these, but typically waste could be classed as contaminated. That could be if you've got, say, illegal immigrants in the back of a lorry. And I can remember several occasions having, I think one day we had 2 full Arctics of coffee, for instance. Must have been worth tens of thousands of pounds. Immigrants in the back when the curtains were open. So that would be classed as contaminated. The Pork Farms pies, I'm not saying this was that one, but typically a packaging error, maybe in a barcode or a best before date, wrong. It then gets declassified away from food into waste. The second picture along comes out of a fish processing plant, and that's batter, for battering basically the cod fillets. Yogurts. And that's just a jumble of what looks like Philadelphia cheese or something like that. So you can imagine the different classifications of waste that come in are very broad indeed. And what it does, basically it takes all that and it turns into 800 kilowatts per hour of electricity and 1200 kilowatts per hour of heat. Both of those numbers are more than CorrBoard use themselves, so technically, actually, BioEnergy is completely cancelling out CorrBoard's carbon footprint. That's the idea of how the plant works. And it basically gives us true circularity. What is circularity? Just to clarify that, the elimination of waste and pollution, the circulation of products and materials, and the ability to regenerate nature. To me, that's the most important part, is regenerating nature. And what we mean by that is what comes out of the ground, whether to make food products, has to end up going back in the ground as fertilizer. That's true circularity. If you've got a gap somewhere, that's not true circularity. Yes, it can be environmentally friendly and sustainable, but you don't get full circularity unless it ends up back in the ground. In this case, that's what happens. So essentially, we created an ecosystem between food waste and corrugated packaging. If that corrugated packaging goes into a food processor, and they have waste, and their waste goes into this AD plant, there is an argument to say that their waste is generating the electricity for the manufacture of the board that their packaging is then made out of. So that's the innovation, really. The whole plant can be run from one laptop. I wouldn't dream of touching any of this because I haven't got a clue how to do it. We've got a couple of guys who look after that side. But that's basically the plant on a laptop. 2 people operate the plant, and yeah, it sounds simple. It's not simple. There is biology involved, but nevertheless, to operate it is relatively easy. So its benefits. So we're permitted to accept up to 100,000 tonnes of waste into the plant, and typically that would go into landfill. So it is displacing that away from landfill. I think that's a big tick. It does provide true circularity. And the electricity and heat is supplied direct into CorrBoard UK. Excuse me. There is a surplus of energy, and that goes into the national grid that we would all use from for our domestic use. So we're about 140% of CorrBoard's output. Therefore, we're 40% over what they currently use in terms of energy. The technology is scalable. What that means is we can bolt on other bits and increase the power output as it's required. So it's really clever technology, but not designed to do this. All we've done is taken the design and innovate a little to get it to work for a packaging environment. And of course, anyone who's buying off CorrBoard will, by default, have a sustainability advantage. And the byproduct, as I've already said to this, is fertiliser. It's called digestate. And it's spread onto local farmland within about 10 miles of the plant. The interesting thing about it, though, is This is a liquid, of which it's about 8 to 10% solids, but it has to be pasteurized. So that means any nasty bugs in it, like E. coli, salmonella, have to be killed. And that's done from the heat that the plant generates, is circulated through pasteurizers, kills the bugs, and therefore we have something that is not going to spread nasty diseases. So it works very, very well. That's where the problems start coming, isn't it? Yeah. So the challenges. Huge amounts of challenges involved with this. Raising the finance. Like all construction projects, the biggest risk comes in that period of time during the construction, where you've got huge amounts of money going out, nothing coming in. People get nervous when things are late. It was really difficult. So we had to go to a specialist funder. And that specialist funder, of course, they're going to charge an awful big interest rate, in our case, 12%. The planning and construction was a challenge, especially because it was an industrial site. But to our benefit, the nearest house was 800 metres away. There is a bit of an odour with this. It's not too bad, to be honest. It's not that bad. And the nearest house 800 metres away meant that planning was relatively simple. There was no, danger of this being stopped because of domestic housing. Compliance, hugely complex. The Environment Agency, all over it, like a fine-tooth comb. And they pick up on everything. And so they should, to be honest, because in the waste industry, of which this is classed as waste industry, there's a lot of dodgy people, let's say. I'm not one of them. Understanding the technology, the key thing there was, I don't get this technology, I know a bit more about it now, but we employed somebody with that knowledge about the technology, but that actually became one of our biggest challenges in the end. Maybe that's a story for another day. The operational issues that we had, basically getting the plant to settle. There's a lot of mechanical work going on, in particular in the CHPs. Combined heat and power units, each one of 400 kilowatts per hour, and they get like tariffs through Ofgem. We have what's called renewable heat incentive and renewable obligation certificate. So these are two tariffs that we get, so a lot of income comes from that. Then we have COVID hit, and that completely changed the dynamic of the market for getting what we call our feedstock. So that's the organic matter we need for this to operate. When COVID came along, manufacturing changed dramatically, and consequently we struggled to get feedstock. We by now had been 4 months in, and we needed to refinance. As I said, we'd borrowed at a rate of 12%. When COVID came, that completely, all the banks that we were looking at refinancing with got very, very nervous. Not as nervous as they got when the Ukraine war started. Energy prices rocketing through the roof, which was great in terms of income, but that also drove feedstock prices even higher, because what was happening was this technology, which is used in a conventional way to generate gas, there's a lot of companies that would generate gas using this technology and pump it direct into the grid. Well, they were getting paid a fortune, so they were pushing feedstock prices up and up and up and up, and consequently, we could almost, we could barely buy something at a regular price. Every day it was going up, 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 and yet we weren't managing to get more for our actual energy price to cancel that out. So that became a huge challenge. And I have to say that's still the biggest challenge today. And then contracts. I guess one of the problems with waste companies is if anyone's got a contract with a waste company, Biffa or something like that, they tie you into contracts minimum of 3 months, maybe up to 12 months. So to get these contracts for feedstock, we were having to wait a significant amount of time before people had even talked to you about a contract on feedstock. So that was a big challenge as well. So the investment cost started at 4.9 million for the plant, and here we are now at 8.9 million pounds and still at 12% interest rate, because banks are so nervous about investing in the sector because there is no clarity on where energy prices are going to go. So this is why I started by saying visionary or fool, because I couldn't foresee that. But that has been our biggest problem, is we have nervous banks. It's all very well innovating. You cannot see things like this, nor would you think things like this are going to happen, but they do. And so there's a lot, when you innovate, it's not simple. You can't think of absolutely everything that's going to come and bite you on the backside, and this falls into that category. Would we do it again? Not without buying a crystal ball, that's for sure, and learning from our mistakes. And those mistakes, as I said, a lot around the operational partner, and that created a few issues for us. But we never innovated to compete, rather to offer something unique. So this is not about competing with anybody else. This was just like giving us a USP in the market for our circularity. So in summary, I think this is still my view. Innovation is risky, but not innovating is even riskier. And I maintain that that is, whether you're buying a new box-making machine or whatever, if it's got an innovation, it can give you an edge. Why wouldn't you? And if you want more information about this and this journey, then visit corbio.co.uk for a little bit more information on that. But that's my journey. That is a really short version. If anyone knows me, I'm only 37. Thank you. Okay.